Welcome back to the On Mission Together podcast. I am your host, Todd Unzicker, coming to you from the NC Baptist Studios here in beautiful Cary, North Carolina, cold Cary, North Carolina. I'm my guest, a Florida boy and a regular NC Baptist pastor, the pastor of Mercy Hill Church in Greensboro, North Carolina, and my friend, Andrew Hopper. Andrew, thanks for coming back on the show.
Man, good to see you. I'm also sitting here in the cold and beautiful Summerfield, North Carolina, where it's 3 inches of ice still on the ground. So I'm with you, man. I'm ready to get back to Florida. We both got some Florida in our roots. So
absolutely. You know what's funny? I don't know if you saw this. I saw on the Weather Channel this morning. It is colder in Miami, Florida this morning than Juneau, Alaska. It was 36
weird,
this
man.
morning. That is really weird. So I'm not sure where we need to go, but we are warm here in the studios, and I'm here today. I wanted Andrew on because this is a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts personally, but I also know that it is a heartbeat of North Carolina Baptist and a resource. Andrew has written a book that is called Chosen, Building Your Family the Way God Builds His. And Andrew, talk to us. Why'd you decide to write this book?
Yeah, man, we wrote the book out of really kind of three sort of buckets. One was, man, our church has had a unique influence in this area, God's grace in our church. Number two, it is our personal story. Me and Anna adopted Faith Ann in 2017. I know you're an adoptive father as well, so it's a unique journey. But actually, most of the book is a theological framework around gospel-centered adoption being born out of our own spiritual adoption, and then how people can be supportive of adoptive families because they are entering a real spiritual battle. And, you know, with the Baptist Children's Home in North Carolina, with so many churches that are in North Carolina that are adoption-minded, man, I felt like this could be a really good resource. Not only, I mean, in some ways, it's for every Christian, because when you think about your own adoption spiritually, it really motivates so much of our Christian life, whether you're going to adopt or not. But then we have, so many churches that have families that have adopted or are going to enter in the foster care system. It's very similar. And this is a good resource to understand kind of where they're at and how we can hold the rope for them.
Yeah. I love the practical encouragement is what I kind of call it, that I think that this book offers it for Christians of no matter what they do for a living, and especially pastors and equipping. You touched on it. One of the other highlights of this is gospel over guilt when we talk about adoption. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that maybe we felt a little bit of a backlash in 15 years ago or so, when adoption kind of really got hot in the Christian community, which is a good thing. Okay, when I was growing up, adoption was never demeaned. It just wasn't discussed. And so churches kind of, there was just sort of reawakening. You think of Russ Moore's Adopted for Life. You think about Tony Merida, Orphanology, these are great. It's great.
Yep.
I think maybe what Christians do is they kind of overcorrect sometimes. And I think that it could become one of those things where, if you're not willing to adopt, that's kind of a litmus test of how serious you are about the faith. And, I think there's a lot of guilt and kind of shame that can get thrown on believers that are just not Ephesians 2:10 called for this. This is not one of the works that God has laid out before them from the foundation of the world. And if you try to put that on them with shame and guilt, what we can end up with is putting the fire under people when really we need to put the fire in people. It's like the fire going under you is kind of this guilt, shame thing. Look how many kids there are. How could you be a Christian and not want to adopt? God adopted you. And really kind of the problem is, and you know this personally, those types of things will take you a little while and a little ways, but the adoption journey is all the way for all time. You're going to need like a much better motivation, and the truth is, man, cute pictures and sad stories are just going to take you a little ways for a little while. We're going to need something much deeper than that. In Chosen, I've tried to really connect, man. If God has wired you up for this, the great motivation that we have for adoption and for supporting those who are adopted. I think that much like the mission field, I know this is near to your heart, not every Christian is called to go. We are called to be involved. There's when you just think scripturally about the mission field, like there's no Christians like, well, I just am not, that's not what I'm into. It's like, well, man, it doesn't really work like that. I think adoption is very similar to that. Not everybody is called to do it, But to have an adoption mindset, to be there for the vulnerable, this steps into 2,000 years of history for our movement. And I think it is right in line with scriptures like James 1:27, that we would care for the orphan. And there's such a great metaphor of the gospel in adoption. We see it in Galatians 4, Romans 8. It's like every Christian understands what it means to be adopted, and so spiritually. And so that's what we try to get into, some of the motivation and the heartbeat of adopting and supporting adoptive families.
What I hear you saying is not the question of, are we called to the adoption of children, but how are we called? Because you use in the book the term rope holders, which I love. It's famous. William Carey says, hey, I'll dangle over the end of the rope over hell if the church will hold. And we use that in the missionary context. Mm-hmm. I love how you're using that here. For our listeners, what are some examples of rope holders that maybe they are physically in a spot where they can't adopt a child like you and I did? But how could they be a rope holder in their local church?
Man, the rope holding thing is as unique as the people who are being called to it in some ways. Every adoptive family is totally different. Some of them, for example, have family close by. That was not my story. But if you have family close by, then a rope holder for you looks different. You have a lot of people that are already stepping into the gap for you. We didn't. Our family needed the extended family of sort of aunt, uncle, grandparents type figures that were more local. And our families are awesome. They're just a long way away, and they came in and helped like crazy. But, there were people in our community group that we needed sort of those familial connections. So, for example, when Faith Ann was born, Faith Ann we have a special needs child. She has Down syndrome. There's a lot that comes with that. People maybe don't realize. I know I didn't realize it. But she was in the NICU unit for, almost 60 days, and half of that time was in Raleigh. We live in Greensboro. Well, I got the flu, and they wouldn't let anybody from our home go see Faith Ann. I mean, Anna was in Raleigh and in Greensboro every single day for 30 days. She would spend the night in one place, spend that morning, then come back, spend the night, the whole deal. Homeschooling our kids here. All of a sudden, we couldn't go. I mean, our community group immediately was like, "Oh, we'll go," and they're driving down the road. They're like, "We're not going to let her sit by herself for one day." That's holding the rope, in my opinion. That's a relational holding of the rope. Other ways that people do it are, man, we need people to help with our biological kids because we got 1,000 court appointments, for foster care, or because we're going to be out of the country for a month for an international adoption. And it's like, man, you have other people in the church that say meals, helping your kids mowing the grass. We're going to be there. Of course, another great way people hold the rope is just by sharing what God has given them financially. I think probably one of the biggest, let me revise that. I think probably the biggest barrier many times for Christians is the financial barrier and the cost of adoption. The thought of somebody stroking a $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 check at some point in their life is not crazy. What's crazy is to think about doing that when you're 25 and have two other little biological kids and you're just barely making it. And so it's almost like God has wired the church up together intergenerationally, where you have people who are in a different life stage that are like, man, we're not really in the stage of bringing, two little kids into our home, but we are in the stage of having the resourcing to do that. Other people that are like, we have the energy, and we have the youthfulness to do it, but we don't have the resources. And so, boom, it's like God is gluing the church together with people being able to be generous. And so those are just a few ways, but we outlined in the book actually how churches can build a rope holding ministry.
Yep. That is our story, as you know, is on a Saturday morning in 2010, a rope holder called Ashley and I up out of the blue and said, God has allowed me to have finances to help you go and adopt.
Wow.
And that literally changed, our lives, because someone was able to write a $20,000 check. They were in a role where the money was not the problem for them. And we were willing to adopt. And so, if there's listeners here, that's a great example. For pastors, let's talk to pastors. We have a lot of listeners who are pastors.
Right.
What do you hope? What do you hope for them? What would you want them to know about this book and first steps that they could use in leading their congregation?
Yeah, I mean, Todd, I learned this from you. I've actually used it all over the country. One of the things that you told me one time when I just very and you probably don't remember this, but I just plainly asked you. I said, "Hey, man, you travel the state, 2,500 churches, whatever it is. What are the difference? What's the difference between churches who are really getting after it, growing, whatever, and churches who are stagnant or dying?" And you said, man, you probably don't remember this, but you said, it seems like the churches that are really going and growing and getting after it and God's doing stuff, they have something they're trying to do. Basically what you're saying is they have a vision and a mission.
Yep.
And maybe it's small. Maybe it's like, man, we have this local school that we partner with, and we're like really invested in seeing evangelism happen to that school. Or maybe it's something huge because it's some big church in Charlotte, and they're launching a church planting thing in another country. But the difference many times is that they have a focus and their people are fired up about something. And theologically, for me, I feel like that fits very well because I'm like, hey, if every single believer is wired up and gifted individually for their Ephesians 2:10 calling, then it seems like all a church is a collection of believers. That church probably has a unique calling as well. Now, we're all trying to do the same thing, make disciples. We're all trying to send, Acts 1:8, Matthew 28, but there's flavorings to that. And so my hope would be, that this book could help serve many of our churches if they don't already have some things in community ministry that they're chasing. It could spark something in them. Now, some churches might not be wired up for this. They're wired up to take care of veterans when they come home. They're wired up for homeless ministry. We have churches all over Guilford County that are doing different things, which is awesome. And you don't have to chase this, but there are probably a lot of churches that, man, have people in their congregation that would be adoptive minds. They would be kind of adoption minded. This would be an easy way to get involved, foster care, adoption, beginning to start. And so that's, man, one of my hopes for this book is that it lends itself really well for, small group Sunday school type stuff. Like, hey, man, you got 10 people, they're going to read the book. There's questions at the end. It's hoping it's going to spark sort of the why.
Right.
And once people get the why, I mean, our pastor said it many times, it wasn't original to him, but if you want to build ships, you don't divide orders and give commands. You teach your men to long for the vast and endless sea. That's a little bit more of what this book is. It's like, hey, you've been adopted, and adopted people adopt people, chosen people choose people. Let's get some people that got a fire for that. And then, man, let's try to see them, resourced, catalyzed, to be able to go out and run after this. And I think I hate to say it. I know we've talked about the percentages of how many churches are plateaued and declining, but there are hundreds and hundreds of them, SBC churches in North Carolina, sadly. And for some of them, I think regaining some things, a mission that they're trying to get on and actually naming it could be catalytic for them. And so I'm hoping that would be helpful here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Proverbs 28:17, without vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
And it's the number one sign that we see.
And one more thing, and there's a lot of churches that are adoption-minded. I mean, we have right here in Guilford County, I mean, right here in the Triad, I mean, I think about First Baptist Summerfield, I think about Life Community Church. These are churches that have reached out to us to say, hey, how can we all help us with this? And, man, they've run their own play, which is great. So this, my hope is this resource might be, used for churches as well that are already in this space as just a tool in the belt.
Right. Well, let's get some tools for our listeners right now that I think are really tangible. First of all, go and pick up the book Chosen. You can get it wherever you can Google, Amazon, whatever you need to do. Get Chosen, and this is building families the way God builds his. That's a first step, I would hope, that all listeners would do. Another thing, there are Andrew touched on this, there are 11,000 kids in the foster care system in North Carolina. Well, there are 3,400 NC Baptist churches. What if we could eradicate child homelessness? What if every one of those 11,000 children had a home that loved Jesus, that demonstrated and declared the hope that we have in Jesus? And we do that through what we call our partnership with the Baptist Children's Home, the Every Child Initiative. But to help every child, it takes every church. And so equipping churches with tools, training, and support. Our listeners can learn more about this by going to every-child.org. And this was something that, Andrew, you and I have talked about for 5 years. What if the church had a vision to eradicate child homelessness in our state? chosen, does it not as a guilt, not with cute pictures and sad stories, but because God chose us.
Yes.
And Andrew, that's what I love about this book, is the connecting the physical and spiritual adoption, giving real world advice for families and churches, and then practical engagement for each church. Andrew, what would you want? How would you want to close? What would you want listeners to know about your journey, what God's done in your life, and why you wrote this book?
Yeah, I think it everything that we do is going to be born from kind of our awe of what God has done for us. And, there's a story, for some friends of ours, they adopted a child with Down syndrome out of a Central American country. And it's crazy, man, where this child was. He was in, a guy was building, a house in this really impoverished area, and he could hear a child crying, and he went and he found this little baby in a trash heap. And the baby was so disfigured and deformed, somebody had abandoned him there. He took the baby to the orphanage, and this family from right here in the tribe, they met him there a couple years later, and they ended up adopting Eddie. And, Eddie's dad, he said, man, me and Eddie's story is the same. He said, I too was saved from a trash heap by a carpenter. And it's like when you get that in your heart and soul, it becomes very hard to think about 11,000 kids in North Carolina foster system. It becomes very hard to think about moms who are right on the razor's edge of choosing life or not, based on, is there going to be a family that steps up for this child? For us not to say, what God has done for me, I want to do for others. And so, that was our story. People say, hey, is the church really excited about this? Because, Andrew, you're really excited about this at Mercy Hill. And I'm like, no, man, I think our church is excited about this because they've been preached to for years that every one of them came into the family but one way: spiritual adoption. Our family's unique, man. We got 4 kids. Your family's the same way. We have 3 kids by biology, 1 kid by theology, and right. Many of us can, I think, we can step into this in a way that maybe is a little scary. We're not sure. Not everybody's called to it. More than ours should be thinking about it. And all of us, I think, if we're born from that gospel-centered sort of motivation, we can all help.
Well, I don't want to correct my friend. Well, I actually love to correct you, but I would say this: Chosen taught me that everyone is called. It's a question of, are you called to actually adopt or be those rope holders?
Right.
And so that's what I hope, is that anybody listening, is that because God chose us, chosen people go out and choose people.
Right, man.
The least of these. And I love that about your book, Andrew. Thanks. It was fun to watch this. I remember Ashley spent a day at the hospital when you guys were.
That's right. I forgot about that. Actually, multiple people from the summit did.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And it was fun to see not just one church, but a family of churches. Man, thanks for being here with us. Love the work that you're doing. Thanks for joining us today.
Appreciate you.
You can check out this show's notes of this podcast for helpful links, all the ones that we talked to you about, Andrew and I talked through. We want you to get your own copy of that, and you can listen to more episodes at ncbaptist.org/podcast. Thanks, Andrew, for being with us. Pick up the book, and let's go be on mission together. Thank you for joining us today. Because of your generosity to NC Baptist, this podcast, along with other helpful resources, are made available for you. Learn more by visiting ncbaptist.org/give.